Hi, good afternoon. This is Oxford Maternity Unit back. I am Wendy Randall. I'm one of the consultant midwives, if you haven't seen me already. To my left, that way, giggling in the corner, is Sarah Piercey, who you may have met last week when she was talking about coping with labour at home. And behind me in uniform is Wendy Tyler, who's one of our managers for our postnatal ward, and they're going to talk to you today about how you manage that baby when that baby is born, and they're going to take turns about. Now we're obviously aware of social distancing, and we should be more than 2 meters apart, and we haven't always managed to do that in the last 2 weeks, and apologies. I think, rightly or wrongly, people have felt a little bit more safe because I've actually had COVID and recovered from it, but we should still be trying. So I'm going to disappear and they're going to try and stay about 2 meters apart and flit in and out of the screen to be able to answer your questions. And can then I just remind you that tomorrow we're very lucky to have Vicky, who is a GP in Oxfordshire, and she's going to talk to you about what it's like being a mum from the minute that baby's born until you go home to hospital. So really good discussions. And then again, Dr. Youssef is on Friday, and he's going to talk to you about promoting positive mental health. So I hope you're enjoying these, and they will answer your questions, and I will see you on Monday. Okay, thank you. And shut the door, please, Wendy. Of course, thank you. Thanks, Wendy. Where do we start?
Should we start
with level 5?
Yes. So
we'll try and start by just talking to you about what might happen after you've given birth. And then as you send us your questions, we'll be able to answer them. And it might be that we both try and answer. I'll try and be more hospital-based, Sarah will be more community-based. But there'll be a lot of crossover. And it might be that we stop what we're talking about to answer questions.
On, so I can see the questions.
I can read them out for you. So generally, once you've given birth, if you've had a birth on delivery suite, and you might have got some risk factors, you might find yourself on level 5 with your baby, which is where I am based. Level 5 is called that because we're on level 5. We take up the whole level. The whole level is dedicated to postnatal care. It is a 43-bedded ward, so it's very, very big at the moment, but we're not needing all of those beds as we're running a different discharge pathway at the moment, which I can talk about later on. When you get up here, there's generally side rooms and bays as a mix. They're quite spaced out now because we're not needing all of the beds. And then what will happen when you get up here is the support workers will show you where everything is. You'll meet your midwife who's looking after you up here, and we'll sort of give you some bits and pieces to get you by and some paperwork. And then you're looked after sort of in a sort of cohort style way. And generally a maximum is 1 midwife to 8 women. But at the moment we're sort of doing more like 1 midwife to 2 women, which is really lovely. And we're very, very grateful for that. So at the moment there's quite a lot of support available on level 5. There's a lot of extra teams working with us. So there's a lot of people up here who you'll see. That includes the team who will check your baby over, which is also called the NIPE. Sarah might
stands for Newborn Initial Physical Examination. So that's a top to toe MOT of your baby. And I'll talk about that a bit more in a while.
Perfect. So that will generally happen on level 5 if you come up here. We also have the hearing screening team as well. They'll come to the bedside and check your baby's hearing. We have our obstetric doctors, and generally all women up here, if you've needed to come to level 5, you'll need some sort of obstetric review. So that will also happen at the bedside. You'll have your midwifery daily checks as well. And then we also have the infant feeding team in place currently. And they are sort of providing an on-call service for us in the day. So they will come up to the ward in the morning, but also if we need them in the afternoon, we can bleep them and they'll also attend. We don't currently have Bounty. We usually do. They're not currently based with us at the moment. They're due to social distancing. And there's any other service I've missed? That's the main one.
That's the main one.
Oh, and we also have the paediatricians. That's the neonatologists, baby doctors. And they also run a clinic as well. So that's if your baby is born very prem, very, very low birth weight. So you might also see our paediatricians as well. Oh, I think we have the first question.
Oh, what's our first question?
So this is from Laura. If you have a C-section, how long are you allowing partners to stay given the virus? So at the moment, Laura, I'll be able to sort of roughly answer your question. No partners are allowed on level 5. So that's absolutely no visitors at all. So I'm really, really sorry about that. If your section is happening on the elective base, that's downstairs in gynae, I think they're allowing the partners to stay for an hour.
An hour or two.
Yeah.
Wendy covered this the other day.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And then I think if it's an emergency section, you go to OA for 2 hours.
2 hours, yeah.
We might be slightly out on those numbers, and also it probably isn't. No one's going to set a timer on you and say you need to have your partner gone on the minute. So there'll be sort of a discussion when you get to the recovery area after your C-section about when your partner's expected to go.
So what else?
Christina.
Who gets to level 5, right? Wendy was just explaining that. So level 5, if you've had your baby on delivery suite, because you've got high blood pressure or diabetes, or that we know there's a problem with your baby perhaps, or you end up needing some assistance or a cesarean, then you will come to level 5 after you've had your baby. So we don't have any antenatal patients here. They're all ladies who've had their babies.
Yeah, exactly.
What else have we got?
2 babies born with hip dysplasia. Do you want to fill this one, Sarah?
Yes, I have had 2 babies born with hip dysplasia requiring some physio. Will baby number 3 still be assessed for this? Yes, I'm going to talk to you in a little while, Vicky, about the newborn check. And as you've had 2 babies previously with the condition, we would automatically make a referral to the Nuffield Hospital for your baby to have a scan, which is usually around 6 weeks. Gosh, they're coming in thick and fast.
Good. Keep us talking. So Jess, are the postnatal rooms still open on the Spires? Yes, they are. So if you give birth on the Spires, you will go to a postnatal room there. And if you give birth on delivery suite and you're only staying in for a very sort of minor reason, for example, your baby needs 12 hours of observations, and that's something that can be done on level 7 at the moment. So there's a good chance you might even end up on level 7 even if you haven't delivered on the Spires. No problem, Christina. Shall I scroll down?
Yeah.
I think someone was typing a question, but they might have pressed enter too soon. So where were we up to?
So we've said about level 5. So I don't know.
Shall I carry on?
Yeah.
Just the discharge process as well. So at the moment, most women, if they're in for themselves, for example, they've had a cesarean, the normal sort of length of stay is 1 night or 2 days. So day 0 is the day you give birth, and then day 1 is the day that we are hoping that we discharge you. So on that sort of second day, or as we call it, day 1, things like your catheter will be removed in the morning, very early hours, around 6. You'll then have some more obs. You'll then have a postnatal check by your level 5 midwife. You'll then be seen by an obstetrician. You'll then have the newborn check, which we'll talk about. And then going from there, hopefully be discharged in the afternoon. Trying to keep this baby focused, as you might have already heard all of this before. That might be the day as well that we get the infant feeding team to see you if you've got any concerns with feeding, so that when you go home, you've got that support mechanisms in place.
And I wanted to say on that, because your baby, you know, like Naomi was saying to you yesterday, and Hannah, that your baby is gonna cluster feed a lot. You know, they'll be born, have their first feed, then they might have quite a long sleep, and then they're going to be feeding very little and often, and that can be absolutely exhausting. So it's a really good idea if you can start hand expressing your colostrum in 37 weeks, and your midwives will be able to point you to the leaflet that shows you how to hand express, and getting that little supply of colostrum there and some in storage, so that when you go home, you know, if you're having any difficulties, you've got something there in store.
I'm going to scroll down. So Ella Rose, I was wondering what's happening with jabs and immunisations at the moment.
Okay, so I can answer that for you. At present, Public Health England are urging us to carry on with all infant immunisation programmes. So if your baby falls into the category that they need a BCG, which we will tell you before you're discharged from hospital, and that's an injection to protect babies from tuberculosis. We will arrange for you to have an outpatients appointment for that. And what we do is we see people on level 1. We ask one parent to come in with the baby, and we have a very spacious waiting area, so you're not going to be sitting crowded in with people. As far as the other routine vaccinations, they usually start when your baby's around 8 weeks. And I've spoken to a GP this morning to check what's going on. So what they are doing at their particular surgery in Farringdon is that you will arrive, you will call to say you've arrived, stay in your car with your baby, and the nurse will call you back and she will go through the vaccine and consent you over the telephone. Okay, you will then go into the surgery where the baby's vaccinations are given, and you will then go back to your car where you will wait and then go in for your postnatal check with the GP. And I am going to talk a little bit more about that in a while. So yes, the vaccination programs at the moment are still going ahead.
Okay. So Shona, I am planning to have baby on the delivery suite because I have fibroids. If there are no complications with the birth, can you go straight home from delivery suite? Do you have to go to postnatal ward? So the short answer is no, you don't need to come to level 5 if there's no indication. Obviously, there's no predicting what will happen. Generally, you'll stay on delivery suite for a couple of hours, depending on what pain relief you've had. So if you had an epidural in labour, you'll be on delivery suite a little longer. You'll then get reviewed on delivery suite, either by your midwife or by an obstetrician, and they'll be able to say if it would be suitable for you to be admitted or to go home. And they are currently doing early discharges from delivery suite, and they're able to get medications for you, all your paperwork, and that shouldn't be a problem. In fact, I think we're encouraging it, as the less time you spend in hospital, the safer it is.
So one of the things we are trying to do, you mentioned earlier about the newborn initial check, and we can do those at any time from when the baby's 6 hours old to 72 hours. Now, obviously, under the current restrictions, those babies who go home when there's not someone who can do that check would normally have gone to see their GP, or their community midwife would have visited them at home and done the checks. But that's not always possible at the moment. So we do have extra staff doing those initial checks. So we will try to get them all done before you go home. That does mean sometimes you're going to have a bit of a wait, okay? Because if there's a long list of babies all going home, we've got to just work our way through them. And what that check will involve is we have a careful look at mum's history for any risk factors. And the main things we have a look in the back of the baby's eyes to make sure there's nothing growing there. We have a look in the baby's mouth to make sure the palate is all complete. And as Hannah mentioned to you yesterday, we cannot really assess for tongue tie in the first week of life, so we won't be looking for that. We have a good listen to your baby's heart and check that your baby's circulation is working properly. If we've got little boys, we check both their testicles have descended nicely, and we also check your baby's hips to make sure they're sitting in their socket nicely. And the midwife will explain this all again to you at the time.
Yeah, perfect. So Leanne, what is the discharge process for someone who has GD? I'm assuming you mean gestational diabetes. If not, please correct me. So because our babies at the moment who are born to a mother with gestational diabetes, they need 24 hours of monitoring. This is usually 3 hourly observations, including their temperature, which is really key, and at least 2 blood sugars. These blood sugars happen from taking blood from the heel. It's quite a quick process. It might be quite distressing to watch, but our support workers are really experienced in doing this and will minimise distress to your baby. The sugars are timed so that they happen. The first one is before the second feed. So we encourage you to feed your baby within the first hour, and then before the next feed, we'll take a blood sugar. If that is normal, we then wait for the next feed, which we recommend within the next 3 hours, and we take another sugar. If that is normal, then we stop the sugar monitoring. We then monitor baby though for still the first 24 hours of life, including the 3 hourly temperatures. After that, if everything's fine, baby can be discharged. Now, assuming you yourself are low risk and apart from the gestational diabetes and you had a normal birth, then you'll be able to be discharged along with your baby. So generally the process for women going home with gestational diabetes is a little slower just because their baby has to stay in. We do ask women to monitor their sugars just for the first 24 hours as well. So it's quite convenient that you and baby are being monitored, because then we can sort of deal with any problems with either of your sugars at the same time. And that's it. And there's follow-up, isn't there, for gestational diabetes in
Yes.
the community with you. Not so much your baby if your baby is fine, but you'll get a follow-up at 6 weeks.
Is there anything else you wanted to say about the ward? Should we move on to...
I probably yes, but
Go
I
on.
imagine it will come up in conversation.
Okay.
So I'm going to wait and see what questions are thrown up our way.
We've got...
I think, Leah, you kind of answered that. She says, how long should we expect to stay before getting discharged if the birth is straightforward? So as you said, Sarah, you need to wait that 6 hours so you can have the newborn checked in hospital. Assuming that that can be done at exactly 6 hours post-birth, you'll then be able to be discharged straight away. But again, there might be some delays. And just
We're not doing them overnight. So the NIPE staff usually start at around 9 o'clock in the morning. So if you have your baby at sort of midnight, it might be worth just waiting in that night so that you can get all your check and your hearing screening done before you go home, because then you're going to lessen the risk of exposing yourself and your baby to COVID by having to go and attend other appointments. Okay. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about when you leave the hospital. And the first thing I want to say is to mums, it's probably really obvious, but you're not going to get back into your size 10 jeans just after you've had your baby. So make sure you're wearing something, got something nice and comfortable packed to go home in, and something for your baby to wear. As a general rule of thumb, for every layer you are wearing, your baby will need one extra layer, okay? And never feel their hands and feet, because they're always freezing cold. Their circulation isn't great. And the best place to feel is either here on their chest or behind the shoulder blades. And that will give you a more accurate idea of what their temperature is like. So your baby is going to initially go through about 8 nappies in 24 hours, okay? And we want to make sure that that baby's weeing well and that their baby's starting to have its bowels open. So you've probably read about the first couple of poos, which are like meconium, which I think the infant feeding team touched on yesterday as well. But just to remind you, that's very black and tarry. Some people say a bit like Marmite.
Yes, we are.
Hello, sorry, did we lose you
I
there
think
for a
very
minute?
briefly.
So in the next couple of days, the baby's poo will change from that black tar, it goes to sort of greeny pesto, and then to like peanut butter. And the most common thing I used to get as a community midwife was, I think my baby's got diarrhea. If you are breastfeeding, your baby's stools will be really, really runny, and they'll have little bits in them that look like birdseed, and that's the milk curds in there. So, and that's perfectly normal if it's nice mustard yellow and runny. If you're bottle feeding, the stools will still be that nice yellow colour, but a little bit firmer, although we still don't want hard stools. Shall I stop on that bit for
Yeah,
see what we've got?
I'm cross-referencing here because I think we've missed a question.
Okay.
So I went on here to find the question. And Yvonne says, is level 7 where green butterfly is? Do you have to go to level 7 as this may be a trigger? No, so you don't have to go anywhere you don't want to. And what I would suggest is making the plan with your community midwife in what you'd like to happen when you arrive at hospital. And we absolutely will give you individualised care and help you come up with a plan that means that when you come to hospital, you feel very comfortable. I'm just going to check we've not missed anything here. So I've got all the questions up on here as well, which is a little bit more helpful. So I think we're up to Lauren, I think. If you're induced, can you not give birth at the spires? So we'll briefly just cover this. Yes, so if you're induced and the induction goes to plan and it's quite a straightforward induction, generally most women who are having a low risk induction as such will be able to go to the spires. But that would be something to discuss with both your community midwife and your induction midwife when you arrive. Okay, so I'm going to try and get it back on here so we can read in front of us rather than me turning my head all the time.
Yeah, that's delayed.
Yeah, they did come up with a missing question, which is good. Okay, so Leah, if planning on breastfeeding, when do they feed first and what support is there in hospital? And when do we see the midwives at home now with the reduced appointments and how much? Should I do the first feed and you do the community site? There is a video from yesterday from the infant feeding team, which will have gone over this in a lot more detail. But what we do recommend is that you try and feed, or at least try and initiate the feed in the first hour. So that's uninterrupted skin to skin. We call it the golden hour. And then your birth midwife, so the midwife who looked after you in labour, will still be